So when Rafid asked me to do this talk, he said, make it fun. So I'll do my best. So yeah, I mean, it's been a pleasure to be here and listen to everyone speak today. I mean, actually, a lot of the things that I'm going to cover in here, and you'll be pleased to know it's very short, are things that we've already touched on already. So in terms of, creating trust, communication, consistency, a lot of that are all things that I think make a good leader. But I'm really interested to also hear what you think about leadership, because there isn't one size fits all, as we've heard earlier. It's very specific and unique, and I think that's also what makes it so great. When I so years back, my first manager post, someone gave me a book called The 1 Minute Manager Guide, and I thought, great, this is going to be great reading. It's going to teach me everything I need to know about managing people and leadership, and I was young and very naive. Leadership isn't a position, it's not a title. It's the ability to inspire and guide and also elevate those around us. And I think if we're thinking from a patient-centric perspective, it goes back to making sure that the patient is empowered to take control of their own health, and I think that's really, really important, and the knowledge that they have about their own situation and about their own position is very key, and I think that's also what people look for when they look for a leader. But thinking about what leaders have, they have one thing, and one thing only. Can anyone have a guess as to what that is? I did say, actually, before I came up here, Elliot should be up here talking, because you're absolutely fabulous. So, yeah, Elliot?
People that they need to lead?
Like,
is that the common denominator?
Followers?
Sorry?
So followers?
Followers, yeah.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And followers look for 4 very specific things. They look for hope, they look for compassion, they look for trust, and they look for stability. And it is those 4 things that I think, when it's either a patient having trust in their physician or their surgeon or whatever healthcare provider that they're with at the time, that is something that they're looking for, and ultimately then what makes a very strong leader. So hope is about having a very positive growth mindset. I think back to actually, so in my own positions, and being very present in that moment of time. It is an element of, you have to start thinking about taking one step at a time, not seeing it as a mountain to climb, wherever you want to be. If it's, you've got a goal in 5 years, I never think in those ways. People have told me in the past, where do you want to be? Where do you see yourself? And I think, well, I'm never really thinking about that. It's about learning, continuous learning, peer-to-peer relationships. You can always do something better, and knowing that, with that growth mindset, you will take small steps and look back and connect the dots. And it's only looking back that you can do that and see how far you've come. So that's an element of what I like to give back to people that I lead and manage, in allowing them that hope and giving them that hope. During COVID, I was working in the hospital at the time, and there was an element of we had to literally cancel every single patient booked in for the next 3 months. And it was hard to see, but even harder for those that are working there thinking, so what do I do now? And they look to you for guidance. They look to you to understand what's their day-to-day going to look like. I had to tell some of my teams to go and work from home. We had, massive desktops and trying to shove it into their car, and then them thinking, when am I going to see you again? And it was difficult. So they weren't used to Zoom. They weren't used to working on Teams, and trying to contact them, and they completely disengaged because it just wasn't something that came natural to them. And it's understanding what people need, and we are very social creatures. There's a reason Zoom are now bringing their employees back to the office, because they realize it just doesn't meet the requirement of what we need as humans. That was something that really enlightened me during that time. And I think it's also just being enthusiastic about the future and having a clear direction and providing that vision for people around us. Are there any basketball fans in the room? James? You others? Oh, Barney? We're going to hear from Kobe Bryant now in terms of the Mamba mentality. So I find this quite motivational.
The day could be today that your career is over. Now what do you do? I said, I better get to work. Rest at the end, not in the middle. And that's something I always live by. I'm not gonna rest, I'm gonna keep on pushing now. There are a lot of answers that I don't have, even questions that I don't have. But I'm just gonna keep going. I'm just gonna keep going, and I'll figure these things out as we go, right? And you just continue to build that way. So I try to live by that all the time.
Have a dream, sacrifice for it, and never ever rest in the middle.
And I came into the NBA, I was like, man, these dudes really don't work that hard. One of the things I would do is, while everybody would be at the cafeteria work, eating and doing all sort of stuff, I just go back to the job. I just go back to the job. How can I show you that, no, I have the edge? Well, you do it through training, right? So when I get up in the morning, my daughter goes with me.
4 a.m.?
4 a.m., my 15-year-old goes with me. She goes with me before school, and it becomes a daddy-daughter thing.
That's cool.
Through that process, she understands the value of hard work. And so it's through those behaviors is where I find the motivation to do it. I think the definition of greatness is to inspire the people next to you. I think that's what greatness is or should be. It's not something that lives and dies with one person. It's how can you inspire a person to then in turn inspire another person, that then inspires another person. And that's how you create something that I think lasts forever. It's not sit around and it's all happy-go-lucky type of thing. If you're a leader, your job is to get the best out of it. You gotta deal with it, face it, learn from it. It's exciting when you win, it's exciting when you lose, because the process should be exactly the same. But the hardest thing is to face that stuff. But what if today is the day that's it, now what do you do?
And essentially, I think that teaches us a lot in terms of perseverance, and if it's something that, whether you're starting a business from scratch, for example, I think there's an element of, always striving to be better, and when we face challenges, for example, we're not always thinking in the right mindset, and it can often, when it comes to looking for opportunities, it's very easy to get into a negative mindset, and we'll often make decisions and make the best decisions for the future when we're in a much more positive mindset, and it's allowing ourselves to have that and understanding what resilience looks like and having that grit to persevere and move forward. The next thing I wanted to talk about was trust, and I think this is key to everything everyone's spoken about in the room today. You really do need to have that trust, whether that's peer-to-peer relationship, trust in your teams, and I think it's, the foundation of leading when we're being honest about it, and feedback plays a very key part in that. I've often received very honest and brutal feedback from people that have led and managed myself, and at the time it can be quite difficult to hear, but I think it also is key in terms of self-awareness and understanding how we're presented to others essentially makes us better leaders, and it's also having that codependency. So, relationships are a two-way, and as much as it is about, helping others, you also need to ask for help too, and I think that is the foundation of what makes a trust relationship, as well as consistency of behavior too. And so stability. This is something about, so triplets came up earlier. The how, what, and why. So Simon Sinek, I don't know if anyone's read the Why book that he's written, but it's quite powerful in terms of also you broke it into different levels of the brain. So we've heard a lot about the limbic brain, quite a lot over the course of the day, and how often when we're in that state, it's a speedy response, but it's also our emotional state. So, and that's the bit that forms the emotional attachment about why we're doing what we do. And Steve mentioned it earlier, and when he was starting his business, and he came back and really thought about and focused on, why it is that they're there, and it gives you purpose. And I think giving people that purpose as to why you're there. Also, if you're thinking about your brand and you as your brand and your image, it's very clear then for your followers as to why they would choose you over someone else. And also focusing on the current moment is very powerful. So just to be present and listen to what people are saying, which brings me on to my last point of compassion. So I used to actually, during my time in London, I volunteered for a charity called Sane. It was started by Marjorie Wallace, who received an OBE for her work just in the field of mental health, and she started the charity over 20 years ago to get more funds for research into schizophrenia. She realized there was a big gap in the area for that, not a lot of research and understanding as to why people develop it or how it's treated. So she started a company called Sane, and when I was working at Roche, she came and delivered a speech about it, and I formed an emotional attachment to what she was saying, but also I believed in her. And so I started volunteering. Then she had a small office in Islington, and you'd go there 4 hours a week and just support people on the phones. But whilst you could have anyone calling during that time, whether the person is having a bad day, or you would get regular people calling, people suffering from schizophrenia themselves. Often you don't see these people, so it's. For me, it was an eye-opener, and I thought the main reason I wanted to do it is to help people. But I realized shortly after I started, and I was doing it for about a year, in that you have to be okay with, firstly, you create a safe space so people want to open up and talk to you. Even if a call gets difficult, you would never hand the phone. You deal with that patient, and you deal with that moment there at the time. But it also allowed me to be okay with the uncomfortableness of holding that call. At the end of the 20 minutes, the phone goes down, and you won't see that, or potentially you might call them, you might speak to them again the following week, but obviously they don't know who they're speaking to. But you almost have to be okay with letting go of that call. And then I realized, well, I'm not actually helping anyone, and that's okay. But you're there, and then. And you learn to listen and really listen to what people say. And often we get into a debate or we get into a conversation and you can't wait to put your point across because, you believe what you believe and you think it's right. But you have to listen to what people are saying and often take a step back and think maybe there's a different perspective. People sometimes will reach out because they want to talk, not because they want to hear what you have to say or want your advice or, guidance. So there's an element of that. Sometimes people do want your advice, and that's fine. But sometimes people just want to talk to you, and that's okay as well. I'm going to end with this story on the right, because I think it's quite inspirational. I don't know if anyone's read Humankind. No. So there's a story in that book, and that's Peter Warner on third on the right. He's an Australian captain, and despite he went against what his father's wishes were, and he wanted his son to take on his family business, but instead Peter wanted to just go and sail around the world because he thought that was a bit more fun than being an accountant. So he went on his sails and he discovered 6 boys shipwrecked off the island of Tonga, and they'd been there for 15 months, and that's some of the boys in the picture, obviously a bit more grown up now. So it kind of just, if you've ever read Lord of the Flies, it's a story based off that, I suppose, but this is a real life story of, these boys were declared dead because, they just went missing. This was 1967, I believe. So they just got a boat one day and sailed out onto the sea. They skipped school, and the storm took them off onto this island in Natta, and that was it. They were there for 15 months, and they survived. And it's a story around teamwork and resilience and hope and trust. So all of those things that we learn and how to build a team. I don't think we can do anything alone. We rely on everyone together, and I think it's just a great way to finish, and I will leave you with that. Thank you all for listening, and it's been a pleasure. Thanks.